I was extremely inspired by it. So I invited you to, or I asked you if you could meet one day. We met in Shanghai. One day overviewing Pudong and Lujiazui. And we were there just to chat, but when I came home, I used these moleskin notebooks. Half of my moleskin was full of stuff that I just noted down. It was so inspiring, and I thought I wanted to share Elaine Ann with you today here. And are you ready?
Yes.
The word is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Peter, for inviting. And hello, everyone. Actually, what Jakob had was a great lead into my presentation. It's about how my company, Kaiser Innovation, has helped a lot of Western foreign companies in the China market for the past 17 years, and how to understand Chinese users. So I've been to many, many homes in China, like hundreds of homes, and talked to many Chinese people to be able to strategize the right products and services for the Chinese market. Okay. So why China? Why are you guys all here? Can I ask, how many of you actually live in China? Okay, half. So the other half is not. And how many of you have products and services to sell in the China market? Okay, also half. Yeah. And how many of you are here because you're kind of confused about China and trying to figure it out? Well, some. Be honest. All right, so why China? Have you seen this map before? Did you know there's 7 billion people worldwide? And inside the circle, there's more people inside of it than outside it. And we're inside the circle right now. There's 3.7 billion people. And China is right in the middle. It's a black chicken that nobody understands. Okay. And inside the circle, 1/3 is China's population. The other third is India, and then the rest of Asia. Oops. Okay. So you could imagine, like, if half of the population of the world is on this side of the world, and China is 1/3 of it, how much impact that would have on all of us, right? And how business would be done. And of course, India is also big, but in terms of purchasing power, as of now, this is 2017, China is actually still ahead. I picked a European example. Dyson is selling extremely well in China. How many of you ladies have the Airwrap? Okay. Well, China consumers made him a billionaire, or the richest man in the UK, right? But there are also examples where things could go wrong if you don't really understand China. Have you seen this advertising? At KFC, we do chicken right. And in translation is, at KFC, being a prostitute is the right thing to do. In China. Okay, so before you launch your ads, before you launch your products, make sure you check with Chinese people if it's the right message. So a little bit about myself. I picked this image because it's actually a real building in China. And it's actually for making movies, okay? So it's half east, half west. That's my background. I actually spent 12 years in the US in the 90s, observing the first dot-com boom and bust in the tech industry. And I came back for 17 years into Asia. So I read, speak, and write Chinese, 可以讲普通话, and also Cantonese, so and English. So I think it's interesting to be striding in between worlds. I know a lot of speakers can also speak Chinese, but it's interesting when you go to a different culture, especially China is so different from the US and many European countries too, right? So my company is called Kaiser Innovation, and we focus on strategizing for the China market. And we've helped many foreign companies, especially US, European, Airbnb, Google, Intel, Siemens, Motorola, B2B, B2C. And also, I also train tech startups on user experience and design innovation on how they can focus on the user needs and come up with insights to inform their new products and services. And it's especially relevant because China market is so fast. Okay, it's speed. So adopting the agile mentality of tech startups is, I think, what many companies should be doing, like the previous speaker said. And we also have a network of people, including Asia-based, on how to tackle the China market, including, I know, Peter, you guys help set up businesses in China, right? Legal advice. We also have partners where they can help with e-commerce, or Chinafy, like helps you translate your business on the website that works in China. And also including social media and like Red Ant, and also we help companies with product development as well. Like we're like the outsourced R&D to define the right product for the China market. Okay, so I believe a lot of you who are not living in China would be very familiar with, the FANGs. You know what is FANG? Yeah, so Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, right? But China is another different ecosystem, right? And it's the BATs, not the animal that flies. But how many of you know about companies like Douban? How many have heard of it besides the Chinese people? Okay, well, it's 100 million users, right? And that's almost half the population of the United States. And nobody outside of China has ever heard of it. Okay? So there are many, okay? Like Dianping. Dianping is like a Yelp. So in China, there's this completely different ecosystem, tech ecosystem, right? So for every single Western platform or tech platform, China has a similar one, or even more than that, okay? So wouldn't you agree that, if the tech environment, the tech platform is so different, and the culture is so different, shouldn't we be developing differently for this part of the world? Yeah? Actually, this was maybe 13 years ago. I have an article that I wrote in the internationalization chapter of this book. It's sold on Amazon, about understanding your users. And in one chapter, I highlighted my experience of when we were helping Western companies or foreign companies in China, we noticed, because I'm bicultural and bilingual, right? So I noticed a lot of cultural differences and clash sometimes. And I actually summarized it in this chart. It's much longer than that. But if you think about, okay, I can only reference myself with US, not because of the trade war, but because that's where I spent most of my time in my adult years. Chinese about Confucius, right? And maybe Lao Tzu, Western, especially European or US, is from like Plato or Aristotle historically, right? Chinese is a collectivist society. Okay, that's why you see Chinese people have 15 people go to karaoke. And rarely do my Western friends do that. Okay, versus an individualistic society. I think Europeans are maybe somewhere in the middle. Okay, not as extreme. And in Chinese, tradition, Confucius is not men are all equal. Okay, because we have filial piety. 君臣弟子, right? You have to respect the elderly and respect people in power. So it is not equal. And supposedly it's okay. And like the Western model, like US is democratic, and China is more authoritarian in some ways. And in Chinese culture, people focus much more on relationships, right? 关系, right? And less about maybe even contracts sometimes. Signing the contract sometimes is is actually just a formality, and it can change to some extent. And in terms of communication, one is direct, one is indirect, which drives some of my Western clients nuts. When yes means no and no means yes. And also, I think Chinese are having a recent history of war and just the past 100 years. Even my grandparents have experienced war. It's much more practical, right, and less philosophical. And Chinese is all about the family, right? All about the family and harmony and balance, where in the US it's about individuality and self and truth. So based on this model, I think you can explain anything that doesn't make any sense to you. Okay, and I also actually recently published a book called Experience Innovation and Designing and Strategizing for the Next $1 trillion Market in China. It's based on my 17 years of experience and what I observed of what doesn't go right and how we can adopt in the China market and design for it. So you can go to the website. It's my name, Elaine Ann, with a dash in the middle. And we actually brought some books here. My colleague Sonia is over there. If you're interested, you can pick up a copy also. So I summarized into top five differences. I would compare this to US because that's what I'm most familiar with. About how is it different when you develop for the Chinese market, okay? Number one, size, okay? So, US is what, 320 million people? China's 1.4 billion people, right? So it's almost 5 times the population. What implications does that have? What do you think? Imagine you have 2 kids at home, and then your Chinese neighbor has 10 kids at home. Okay? Does that make a difference? It changes everything, right? Because it's so much harder to manage 10 little kids, right, than 2 adult kids. And you can actually see in examples like, it was just November 11th recently, and in one single day, China sold on Alibaba, Taobao, $32.8 billion US, right? One day. Also invited Taylor Swift to Shanghai. And well, this is already old data, but if you compare the Singles Day to Cyber Monday and Black Friday, it's like, well, it's off the charts. Why? Because China has so many people, right? Number 2, speed. Okay, because we help a lot of foreign companies, especially companies with tech R&D in the Chinese market, we can see this all the time, right? In US companies, they do fundamental research, okay? And just research, I'm talking about user-centric research. I'm not even talking about technology research, okay? Could easily take 3 to 6 months, just research. In China, 4 to 6 weeks is product development. The product is out in the market. And that's like what Xiaomi does, right? So the speed is such a big difference. And time scale is so different. I talk to European friends, I have Dutch friends like in Philips, and they say, can I visit you next year in June? Week 32. And I'm like, when's week 32? In China, it's next week, okay? So we have completely different time scales in our heads, right? So if you plan way too far ahead, number one, you don't know what the policy is going to be anymore in China by then. Plus, the market would have been eaten up by somebody else. Yeah, so we often encounter foreign companies coming in, we look at the product, we're like, Xiaomi has it, right? Because the time scale is way too different. And do you know why it's so fast here? Because you have 10 kids fighting for food versus 2, right? So if you're slow, you don't get any food on the table. That's my analogy. So you can really see this in quite different examples. Do you know what this photo is? This is the bike sharing war, okay? Which only happened just a few years ago. OFO, the yellow bike, only started in 2014. By now, it's dead. It died earlier this year, like January. So there were actually 20 companies fighting in China. And the only one survived, I think, is Mobike now. So you can see how fast things are. So if you take a few years to do R&D, I'm sorry, you're out of the game. Okay. Number 3, price. Okay. I see over and over again, Western clients come in with an expensive big price tag and unwilling to lower it. Unwilling. Okay, because they're like, oh, we want to keep our brand image, we don't want to like destroy it. And then what happens is, you encounter like companies like Xiaomi. Like how much is this RMB? 69? How much is that in US? 10? 10 US? Okay. Plus now you have this. Have you guys seen this? You can rent a power bank for 1 RMB for an hour. You don't even have to buy it. So it's a sharing economy model. So this is present in every single restaurant and every single mall, right? Plus, I call this the China math. This is a very popular app called Dedao. Okay, so it's like an Udemy, if you know that in the US. And take a look at how much it will cost you. Oh, let me see this really. I'll tell you. But actually, there's a price at the bottom. It's 199 RMB. Guess for how long? You can listen to 5 minutes of business school from this guy on the app, and that's for a year. It's 25 RMB per year. Not per month, not per hour, not per time, but 25 RMB per year. However, if you take your calculator out and do the math, times 100,000 people, how much is that? It's 19 million RMB, and that's only one person on this platform. And there are hundreds of people on this platform. Do you see how the math goes? Amazing, right? Number 4, culture. I actually cannot emphasize how important culture is. And I think many companies don't see this, and they think it's just about translating the product into a different language. No. Let me do an experiment here, very quickly. This book is called The Geography of Thought by Richard Nesbitt. So here you see 2 animals and grass. Okay. If you were to pick 2 between the chicken, cow, and the grass, which 2 would you pick together? How many of you pick chicken and cow together? Okay, some. How many of you put cow and grass together? All of you are Asian. This experiment says, so this book is about geography of thought, how Asians and Westerners think differently. And supposedly, a lot of Western mindset is categorical, so they would divide animals and plants. Okay? But if you're a relationship-oriented, it's the cows eat the grass. Okay? Probably has nothing to do with chicken eating the grass. Okay? But it just shows how psychologically we're wired a little bit differently. So I guess because all of you are interested in China, you're more relationship-based. And you can see this in many things, like US is individualist, Chinese is collectivist, and you see it where? Have you noticed our Beijing Olympics logo is not 1 mascot? It's 5. Why? We're collectivists, okay? We cannot stand only having one little guy standing in the middle, okay? We need to be, embracing. We need to be, because China has 56 different ethnic groups, right? And interestingly, do you know the Maslow hierarchy of needs? Interestingly, this MIT guy, Nevis, said that the Chinese Maslow hierarchy of needs is different. Our need for loving belonging is actually at the bottom. It's much more important than food and shelter, because we're collectivists. That's where all the guanxi is. Okay? And you see this in products. How many of you use WhatsApp? How many friends do you have in WhatsApp? In one group? 10? More than that? Every Chinese group on WeChat has like maybe 500 people, right? If you have 10 groups, you have how many? 500 times 10, okay? My Western friends ask me, how do you even read the messages there, right? It's just like keeps flowing, right? And Chinese people just copy and paste, right? 恭喜你,恭喜你,恭喜你,恭喜你, right? So you can see how our culture fundamentally affects how you design products and services. I would even argue, because we're so collectivist and so relationship oriented, China's tech ecosystem are ecosystems and co-opetitions. So they're not single product companies. So if you look at Xiaomi does everything, okay? So it's not just phones anymore, but the entire ecosystem of IoT, Internet of Things in homes. And collectivist means we want to be similar and not different. Look at all these apps. They're kind of similar, right? People don't want to stick out. If you stick out, you get shot. That's true. It's very different from the US. So from Didi to Alipay to Baidu to Dianping to Ele.me, all very similar interfaces. And interestingly, oops, okay. Have you seen this app? It's called Reworm. It's in WeChat. So for some reason, Chinese people like to have a friendly competition. So you can look at your friends and see how many steps they walked each day. My Western friends would be like, why would I care? Okay, obviously I haven't moved that day. So this is the Chinese tech ecosystem. It's actually all related. They are competitors and collaborators at the same time. So I'll give you a scenario. Let's say you want to eat Chinese food tonight. You open Dianping, the app, and then you pick a restaurant. Right there, you can call a cab on the Dianping app. So it links to like Didi, right? And then after you take the Didi app, it links to like WeChat, right? So everybody's collaborating together. But in the US, you will never see Yelp linking to Uber, linking to PayPal. So mentally, just not wired the same way. In the US, if you're too big of a conglomerate, the government separates you, right? That's why Google has a company called Alphabet, because monopoly is not good. Well, in China, I can say that there's a lot of monopoly, and it's okay here. Now, my last point is language. The Chinese language is a visual language, right? Versus a phonetic. Many Western languages are phonetic. Okay, you can spell it. Chinese language, you can look at the word and you're like, what? I forgot how to say it. Okay, so it's like little pictures, really, right, in Chinese language. And also extremely condensed, because we have thousands of years. Actually, I think Chinese people can say 4 words for the entire conversation. It'll still make sense to the other person, right? It's very condensed. So how does this affect products? We were working with Google, and you can see how it affects the interface, right? You just, like, especially for German, you can't actually fit all that words on the same page, right? Like this, you can only show 4, and here you have what, 12? So it fundamentally changes like how you design for your products and services. So lastly, because of that experience, what my company has created now is actually a program and trip called Experience Digital China. For those of you who are not familiar with China, it's a 1-day trip. It could be in Shenzhen, it could be in Shanghai, Hangzhou. And it's for people who are not familiar with the tech ecosystem here to immerse themselves 1 day in cashless society, and in all the apps that, for Chinese people, it's pretty normal. So it's called the Experience Digital China trip. And let me show you a video quickly. DJI is the largest drone company in the world by Chinese. Xiaomi. It's the 9-watt. So we've taken many groups to this trip. For mainland Chinese, it's like so normal. We do this every day, okay? But for foreigners, I was like, I've never even heard of this, okay? So we've taken like HSBC lawyers over here, Zurich Insurance, like senior executives over here. And because I believe for our clients, like if they come over to China, they stay in Shanghai, they go to Marriott, and then they go to Starbucks, and you don't pay for anything, because it's paid by the host, right? You actually don't get to understand China at all, at all. Even beggars uses QR codes nowadays. And during Chinese New Year, like kids have a QR code here, so elderlies can give like QR code, give money to them. People don't use cash. People don't even use websites. People use MIDI programs, right? So even if you don't understand that fundamentally, anything that you do or all the money that you invest in building products and services will fail. So we go over one day. You even get to see a noodle dance at Hai Lao, which is like a chain restaurant very famous in China that gets reviewed at the Harvard Business Review, and go through WeChat, DJI. Hema is Alibaba's manless supermarket, Didi, Mobike, Xiaomi, etc. Okay, finally, this is my last slide, is talk. Is that how you say thank you in Danish? Yes. And this is a Lego 2020 version of a Chinese Spring Festival. Okay. So I think they have localized it pretty successfully. And lastly, actually, I'd like to offer you, I will give you a free ebook of this book. If you want to scan this QR code and answer a few questions, and we can see if we can help you in China. Okay? I'll keep this up, and thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I hope that you put up Lego as your last slide. Lego is big in China nowadays, and I had the pleasure of writing the feasibility study for China. It was one of my bigger jobs. It took some time. I had to go relocate to Lego in Billund in Denmark and stay there at a hotel for a couple of weeks, interviewing all the important people inside Lego, and then piece together what they thought about going to China and setting up manufacturing here. And it ended being hopefully what I thought was a good report, and it turned into a very big factory. I think it's a $300 million investment, something like that, in Jersey, and now you have Legos everywhere. But thank you very much for an inspiring talk. It's time for coffee now. Coffee is the other side of this wall. You can either walk this way around, I guess, or if they will remove that fence there, then you can go that way.